Hey everybody, welcome back to Franchise Player, and today we're checking out some games on the Game Boy Advance that I think still hold up today. The Game Boy Advance is one of my favorite handhelds of all time, and the games we're checking out today I think are timeless and are the perfect game for a handheld where you can just pick it up, play it, put it down, and have some great quick play sessions. Without further ado, let's get right into this list. All right, so first up here we have Pocky and Rocky with Becky, aka Kihi Kai Kai Advanced as it's known in Japan. This game released here in the States all the way back in October of 2002, and if you're unfamiliar with the Pocky and Rocky series, you're really missing out. This is a shoot 'em up game, arcade style shoot 'em up that is, and you're able to choose between three different characters, which I think are all pretty unique. You have Pocky and Rocky, of course, and you also have Becky in this game. So a selection of three different characters, and each character will have a different form of an attack, so it does provide some variety there in the gameplay. This game in particular did get, I guess, mixed reviews at the time of release, and a lot of people were basically saying, hey, it was too easy. I personally think maybe I just straight up suck, which is definitely a possibility, but I think the Pocky and Rocky games are normally fairly difficult. And this one, if you get hit twice, you die. I guess before this launched, they were considering a one hit and then you would die. So luckily they made that too. But yeah, I think the Pocky and Rocky games are actually fairly difficult, and you have to pretty much learn the movements and patterns of the enemies to like really go through a level and get a higher score. I'm really not surprised at all how well this game holds up, because within the past couple of years, I had actually played Pocky and Rocky Reshrined on my Switch. It's also on PS4. So if you're looking to play something in this series that has a bit fresher of a coat of paint, check that out. But this GBA release is still hella fun, and I highly recommend it. Only real con is if you want to pick this up on GBA, if you're a physical collector, is this game is crazy expensive if you want a copy of it, whether that's complete or loose. So you might be better off emulating this if that's a route you want to go, or throwing this on a flash card. Next up here, we're taking a look at a game that I think is criminally underrated, and I don't even think a lot of people actually even know this game exists, and that is Konami Crazy Racers. And Konami Crazy Racers came out June 11th of 2001, so it was a pretty early GBA release, but looking back, I think the reason why this took a huge hit and wasn't nearly as popular as it should have been or could have been was Mario Kart Super Circuit, aka Mario Advanced, literally came out 2 months later in August. So if you were kind of, fresh to the GBA and wanting to sit it out for a kart racer, I guess if you were like fiending to have a kart racer, you could have got this, but I think most people were fine waiting a couple more months to get a Mario Kart game, which is unfortunate because I think this game is really fun. I know this might be kind of a hot take, but I think I actually prefer Konami Crazy Racers over Mario Kart Advanced. Reason being, I just think the art style in this game, and I think some of the abilities, the power-ups, and the music are a little bit better. And I don't know, Mario Kart Advanced is awesome, don't get me wrong, but this game is pretty cool. You have 12 characters to choose from. I believe 2 are unlockable, but the characters in this, with it being a, Konami racer, you have characters from Gradius, Castlevania, Dracula's from Castlevania, Parodius, and then there's even a Metal Gear character. So it's kind of cool to have a kart racer with, some Konami characters. It's a nice little switch up from, the run-of-the-mill Nintendo stuff. But yeah, if you're, digging out the GBA or wanting to go back to some Game Boy Advance games and you're itching for a kart racer or maybe just a racing game in general that is a little different, and, maybe you're just getting kind of tired of, the Mario Karts of the world, I definitely think Konami Crazy Racers still holds up. And, yeah, I don't know. If you end up trying this out, let me know what you think. Personally, I'm a huge fan. The next GBA game that I think really holds up is Pokemon Pinball Ruby and Sapphire. And being a massive Gen 3 fan, I have no idea how I've never played this game before, dude. I've actually haven't played either of the Pokemon Pinball games, and I was shocked at how well this game holds up. And this game came out August 25th of 2003. So Ruby and Sapphire had already been out for, I think, like 4 or 5 months by the time this came out. And I never got around to this. I didn't even know anybody who had this game growing up, which is crazy because I feel like back then everybody had a copy of Ruby and Sapphire. And one thing I'll say is, even with this game being over 20 years old, the graphics on this hold up extremely well, and so does the soundtrack. So if you're a fan of Gen 3, trumpets and all, with kind of the stereotype there of the soundtrack of Hoenn, the soundtrack, the visuals of this game are awesome and hold up super well. If you grew up with Gen 3 or if you're just kind of a fan of this era of graphics, I think you'll really love Pokemon Pinball Ruby and Sapphire. Like, I'm not even a pinball fan really, but I thought this game was really fun. The effects, the graphics, the art style, pretty much any visual in this game I'm a massive fan of. As you can see, Makuhita is just chilling there off to the right, cheering you on as you play. Pokemon Pinball Ruby and Sapphire got an 82 on Metacritic, which is extremely solid, and I definitely agree with that rating. I think somewhere maybe in the mid 80s would have been a bit better, especially for a pinball game. But this game is pretty much everything I would want in a Game Boy Advance game, man. It's easy to pick up and play. It's not going to sink up a ton of time unless you really want to sit down and just, grind this game out and try to, catch as many Pokemon as you can. Overall, huge fan of this. Highly recommend it, whether it's physical or you're emulating it. I think this is a fun game to kill some time with. And next up here, we have Donkey Kong Country. And this game definitely stands the test of time. And I normally like to put, I would say lesser known or maybe more obscure titles and lists like this instead of being like Pokemon Emerald still holds up. And obviously Donkey Kong Country is a legendary game. And during my 30 days of only playing a GBA challenge that I did a while back, I sank a ton of time into Donkey Kong Country. And I went back and even replayed some levels after I beat it. Like, this is one of those classic games where it's like, if you want to show someone a legendary game from a certain decade, the 90s in particular, Donkey Kong Country definitely has to be on that. And it's actually wild how fun this game still is. One complaint that people do have with this port, even though I don't think it's super valid, is the graphics kind of being rough and downgraded, with it being 1 on a GBA and 2 not having a backlit or frontlit screen on the original Game Boy Advance. If you play this on an SP, I still think it looks good. I think they had to compensate a bit with the colors and some of the textures and just the way things look because of not having a frontlit or backlit screen. But even today, I think this still looks fine, and the art style I think has aged pretty well too. There was some quality of life improvements too for the port when this was ported, in 2003. With that, quality of life with save points. I never played the Super Nintendo version, but from my understanding, it could be kind of brutal in between levels for saving. And then 2, there's some fun mini games. So yeah, if you already haven't, for some reason, if you just have never given Donkey Kong Country a shot, please do yourself a favor and play it on the GBA. And last but not least here, we have a game that might be considered the best on the list by many, and that is Astro Boy Omega Factor. Astro Boy Omega Factor was released here in North America back in August of 2004. It was developed by Treasure and Hitmaker and then published by Sega, so there was some talent behind this game, no question. This game I think definitely flew under the radar for a lot of people, probably just assuming it was some kind of licensed game that was, plentiful in the early 2000s, right? It seems like back then if there was a TV show or a movie, there was going to be a video game made of it. And around the same time, there was the early 2000s Astro Boy anime. If you were a kid at the time, you were probably watching it. But this game is much more than just a licensed generic title that was, going to be found in a bargain bin, in my opinion. This game is an incredible beat 'em up with actually a fair amount of depth, especially for a GBA title. One thing I really want to compliment this game for is the graphics, especially for a Game Boy Advance game. There's only so much you could do with the horsepower of that GBA, but I think they really did a good job at extracting, it seems like every ounce out of the GBA, at least for some of the backgrounds, right? Like the background on this level right here, there's a lot of good shadows, there's depth, there's a pretty good amount of detail, I'd say, especially for a Game Boy Advance game, and I think the enemies look really nice. On top of that, it's really cool that Astro Boy has a fair amount of attacks at his disposal, from actual physical combat to lasers and being able to fly around and dodge attacks that way. For a Game Boy Advance game, this is up there in my opinion. I would put this in the same tier as Dragon Ball Advanced Adventure, where GBA was kind of in its rhythm at that point, and they had really figured out a way to make a game that felt like it could have been on maybe even a 90s home console, in my opinion. Unfortunately, if you're a physical collector, this game consistently goes loose for like 60 to 70 bucks on eBay. If you want CIB, that's a whole nother story. So if you want to play this, don't be afraid to go the emulation route. That's actually how I ended up playing this. And I'm super happy with this game. I mean, this is one that I'll probably go back to, and I think it definitely stands the test of time, especially for the GBA. If you haven't played Astro Boy Omega Factor, definitely give it a chance. All right, guys, so that'll do it for today's video. Let me know what you think of these 5 Game Boy Advance games. I feel like I'm still discovering new Game Boy Advance games to this day. I mean, such a massive library. But, as usual, drop any recommendations if you have them. Appreciate you for watching, and we'll see you soon with another video.